As it's nearly Halloween, how about we share some creepy stories? I'll go first. When I was about 13, my mum and dad invited round our previous neighbors from the block of flats we lived in until I was 5 years old. Anyway, I'd been sent to bed but could still hear everyone talking about this and that, until the woman neighbor said, "Hey Digsy's mum, do you remember when Digsy used to complain that there was someone in his room? Well, there's a family that's just moved into the floor above who have a 3-year-old son. He is complaining of the exact same things Digsy did." This creeped me out. I had no recollection of any of this, so the next day asked my mum. Her first reaction was, "You don't remember?" Then she told me all about the weird stuff that used to happen, footsteps up and down the hall, shit going missing and stuff. She said the final thing to happen was when she was listening to a record one day, and it started to slow down, like someone was holding a finger gently on the platter till it finally came to a stop. My mum said she snapped at this point, and started shouting, "Will you leave us the F alone?" As soon as she said this, the record went straight back to playing normally, and we never experienced anything again. I've never experienced anything like that since. In these days I'm quite skeptical of such stories, but I believe my mum. Strangest thing is how I found out about it, from someone else 10 years later experiencing something similar. Back when I was in college there was an old dormitory that was empty and locked up. The first floor windows were covered up with thick black curtains and the doors had chains and padlocks on them. Well, my second year of school I got my EMT certification and started working for the campus EMS squad. That was easily my coolest job ever, and there were perks other students couldn't get. One of those were keys for everything. So obviously we used those keys to go everywhere. Most places were pretty boring. My now best friend, who was the other EMT I worked with, decided to make the old dorm our hangout place. We would sneak in with friends and drink there on the weekends or nights where we didn't have class. We usually stayed on the first floor on just one wing of the dorm. The one closest to the back entrance. We didn't stray because the place was dirty and had cobwebs. So one night we were drinking in the one room we set up with tables and chairs that we seized. We were all together. Nobody was missing when somebody very close to our room and very loudly screamed, "Who the F is there?" To which one of you drunkenly responded, "Who the F do you think it is?" A very confused voice responded back, "You're not coming with me then, John?" They sounded like they were walking away from us towards the center of the building, away from the stairwell. Incidentally, none of us were named John. A few minutes later we could hear on the floor above us, a very old building floor that's super thick, a rumbling sound that kind of shook the walls. The rumbling stopped right above us with a giant crash. Shit officially just got creepy. We all run up the stairs and make our way to the hallway above the one we were hanging out at. Right at where our room would be on the first floor was a giant filing cabinet on wheels. It was just there. Nobody else was there. You could see the wheel tracks on the floor because it was dusty as shit. But there were no other footprints around besides our own. We all fucking bolted without getting our stuff. No stopping to get our booze, or turning off our radio, or turning off our battery-powered lantern. So we obviously have to back and get our stuff. We waited a few days. A friend of mine and I went one evening to go get it. First we go to the window and see if we can see our stuff in there. My friend looks in. I didn't. He said he thought he saw somebody in the doorway. I thought he was acting retarded because of what happened the other night. We sneak in and make it to the room and get our shit. Somewhere down in towards the center of the building we hear a door shut. It's completely dark that way. We hear a door closer open and we don't wait to find out what the F that's about. So I'm not a person who believes in supernatural stuff, and the same goes for my friends. We decide that we need to figure out what is going on with this building. So about 6 of us devise a pretty easy plan to go about with. We circle the building one night and check all the doors and windows to make sure they were all locked up. Then we went to our usual entrance. Left 2 people on the inside of it to make sure nobody came in or out. Then the rest started going from dorm room to dorm room checking to make sure nobody else was there. We'd go hello? And obviously get no response. We make it through our hallway we hang out at and our tensions ease up. One of the people at the outside door moves up to where we stopped and we go to the second floor where the filing cabinet was. Because it's back at the original place with the wheel tracks and no effing footprints. Tension in the group rise. We start doing the whole hello? And no response thing again. We get about halfway though the hall and one of us gets the idea of saying, "Oh come on, it's your friend Johnny." A giant thud below us. Muffled screams from the two we left as lookouts, probably saying something along the lines of "what the F was / is that?" A giant thud behind us on the same floor. Where nobody could have been because we went through those rooms and we would have noticed somebody else slamming a door right effing behind us. It turns into a race to get back out the way we came. Past the doors that were just slammed. As we get into our hallway, we can hear doors opening and closing in a way that something was coming toward us from the center of the building again. We get a few hundred yards away before we all stop running and make sure we all made it. We found another place to hang out after that. It's torn down now and a real dorm is built over it. Edit, I forgot to mention something else. We never put it together that this was never a dorm, even though the hallways were really wide. And the sum of the rooms would have windows next to the doors like an office usually does. That was the type of room we hung out in because it was a bigger room. Well, once in a while we would notice that the window would get foggy, like when you breathe on a window foggy, but it was always on the hallway side of the window. Like if somebody was looking at us through the glass and watching us. We never put that together until after the Who fleeing in terror incident. Good to bring up old memories like that. I didn't feel like sleeping anyways tonight. I'm not the overly adventurous type, but a friend of mine is, and he told me a similar story a few years ago. He's a fellow Redditor, so I hope I get the facts straight. He and a few of his friends went to an abandoned mental hospital in our city. They like to explore abandoned buildings all the time. So it's late one night and there's a field of tall grass leading up to the building. There are obviously no lights on in the building and there's just a creepy aura about it. Two of the big black dudes that came with them stopped at the door and actually refused to go in. So they go down the halls, floor by floor, and there's nothing in any of the rooms, but there is crazed, mindless writing all over the walls in many of them. They finally make it to the top floor and it's nothing but a long, pitch black hallway with a door at the end of it. They walk down the hall, and being the crazy adventurers they are, decide to see what's inside. However, it's the only door in the building that's locked. Multiple guys pound and kick at the door to try and break it open, but it won't budge. One guy shines a flashlight through the keyhole, or some sort of hole in the door, can't remember, to see what's inside. Nothing, except more crazed writing on the walls that was visible only by the faint light. After failing once again to break the door down, they give up and walk back down the hall. When they get to the end, at the stairwell, they hear the door fling open and slam the wall. It's still pitch black, and the only thing they can see is a huge, shadowy figure in the doorway. Then they hear thumping, slow at first but the pace quickens. The figure is running towards them. They sprint down the stairs faster than they've ever run before, and all the while they hear just a few flights above them, thump 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 thump. They make it to the first floor and burst out the door where the two guys are waiting outside. They tell them to run and they all sprint to their van, get in, and pull away. They look out the window and see that huge, dark figure still chasing them. I've tried to remember the story the best I could. I don't think my friend is a liar, so I always believed him. I just always thought it was a cool story. Okay. This is 100% true even though most people I tell this to in real life don't believe me. When I was really little, my parents would let me stay up late on the weekends and watch TV until I fell asleep. I really loved these times and I would stay up later than anybody else just because I could. Well, one night I was almost asleep on the couch when I heard a noise on our front porch. It was the sound of our old-fashioned porch swing moving back and forth. I was a little scared, so I crept toward the bay windows of my living room and peeked out towards the porch. Sitting on my front porch swing was an older woman, probably in her 50s, wearing nothing but a nightgown, covered in blood and holding a huge kitchen knife. I flipped out immediately and ran screaming into my parents' room but was too terrified to form words. My parents saw that I was upset, but when I finally was able to tell them what I saw, my dad got really angry and told me that it was just a dream and to go back to bed. I refused and kept crying and screaming until he had had enough and snatched my arm and dragged me towards the front door to prove that nothing was there. I kicked and screamed all the way trying to make him stop, but he kept pulling me. Finally we got to the door, he unlocked it, swung it open and said, "See, Therese, nothing." To this day, I have never seen the look of fear and shock that was on his face when that woman turned and stared at both of us and slowly stood up with the knife. My dad slammed the door shut and got my mom to call the police while he went and got his gun. He went back to the door with a 12 gauge and cracked the door enough to stick the barrel out. He asked her what she was doing and she said somebody killed my husband, but it wasn't me. My dad told her that the police were coming, and she freaked out, grabbed the knife and walked away. Police found her 15 minutes later trying to break into one of our neighbors' houses. I never slept in the living room again. Edit. Oh yeah, I forgot that after she left, my dad called and warned my crazy uncle who lived next door what was happening. Apparently he was waiting on his front porch with his shotgun when she walked by. He pointed it at her and just said, "Keep moving, bitch." Update. I just talked to my mom and she said that they never really found out the whole story, but apparently she was crazy and off her medication. Her and her husband got into a fight and she tried to attack him with the knife, but didn't seriously hurt him. When he got her out of the house, she cut herself with a knife, either trying to commit suicide or make it look like her husband did it. The police never talked to us about it, so that's just what they heard from the woman's neighbors. Something similar happened to a friend of mine. It was about 1 a.m. and he heard a noise outside his front door. His front yard is really dark, so he looked through the peephole rather than opening the door. He couldn't see anything but could tell something was below the peephole. He decided to open the door slowly, and as soon as he did, an older lady whose face was covered in blood and only wearing a t-shirt, no underwear or pants, tried to run into his house. He slammed the door on her and called the cops. While waiting for the cops, he kept looking out the little hole on the door, and every so often she would scurry back and forth on his front lawn. I wasn't there, but I picture it like the alien at the birthday party in Signs. So the cops finally show up and detain the women and then get to the bottom of the story. It turns out the woman was his neighbor and she was extremely drunk. She had been drinking and locked herself out of her house and tried to get back in by breaking the window with her face/hands. Side note, the neighbor no longer calls the cops when my friend has parties.